Okay, so to continue with the travel log. I don't tell what people usually tell in travel logs, what places look like and, you know, the history. I don't do that. Anyway, so after the time in Dharamsala, then Ruby and I went to Delhi, and I gave a talk at the Tushita Center that evening. And it's interesting because so many different kinds of people come to that center. There's a whole group of Indian people. They're the majority, I would say, who come to the talks. And then there's some expats, and then there's travelers who are passing through. So it's a really interesting mix of people to give a talk to. And so we were just there for one day, and then we flew to Bangalore, and I gave a talk at the Dharma Center there, which is a wonderful group of people, mostly Indian, but a few expats, not so many. And just they listened so well, and they asked really good questions. And so I gave one talk on anger, and then the second time I spoke there right before coming back, just 8 days ago. No, actually a week ago. My goodness, a lot's happened in that week. I gave another talk there. So we have the video from the first talk, and I was thinking that while I gave it to Venerable Tarpa, so while we're doing the Tantra class this afternoon, maybe the people who aren't doing that could watch that talk. Yeah, she put it somewhere so you can check up and find it. You have it? Okay, good. Did you watch it yet? Okay, we'll put it on the web and everything. Okay, so gave a talk there, and then the next day went on to Mysore and took a taxi to Sera Monastery. Okay, so here we're getting into the South Indian monasteries. So the three, what they call the three seats, these are the three chief Galupa monasteries, Sera, Ganden, and Drepung, from Old Tibet. They were the big monasteries in Lhasa, each the size of a town, actually. You know, they say Drepung had over 10,000 monks there. I mean, just huge establishments. So in exile, they set themselves up again. They all, you know, after they fled into India as refugees, then Nehru and the Indian government very kindly gave the Tibetans land to till. And so they had to go down to South India and clear the land, and there were lions and tigers and snakes and all sorts of things. And they grew corn for the first few years and lived really in utter poverty. It was really bad living conditions. Both in Bailakupi, where Sera is, and in Mungot, where Drepung and Ganden are. And so the monasteries were the main establishments there, but then also there were lay camps. And it's funny, they still have the camps by number, Camp 1, Camp 2. After all these years, I think it would make people feel better if they gave the camps names instead of camps, you know, like you're still in a, yeah. But they haven't. Anyway, so these were the Tibetan settlements in southern India. And there's been an incredible change in them over the years, because like I said at the very beginning, they were really, really poor. And then they began to collect more donations, beginning from Westerners, and then later from Taiwan and overseas Chinese. And now the monasteries are doing so much better, and they're building huge prayer halls, and all the khamsan. The khamsan are like subdivisions in the monastery, because when you have thousands of people living there, you can't, you know, deal with that many. So they're divided into khamsan according to the region that they came from in Tibet. And so you know, when you're a little kid, if you're a monk, then you go to the khamsan where your uncle is, you know, or your older brother or somebody else, and then they're kind of like your genla. They take care of you, and they teach you the alphabet, and they teach you memorization and so on. And then as you get older, then you start going to the classes in the monasteries. And now all three of the big seats have schools where they teach the kids some secular subjects for the early years, you know, and they learn reading, writing, and a little bit of secular subjects, not a whole lot, yeah. But the education program is basically as it has been for the last several hundred years, and you memorize and debate and so on and so forth. They say that in exile, the educational standard, or the academic standard, isn't as good as it was in Tibet. And I suppose part of that was because in the early days they had to go work in the fields. Now they don't have to. They hire Indian workers to go work in the monastery fields that the Indians gave them. So now they don't have to do that, but now the big distractions and problems in the monasteries are the internet and the cell phones. Yeah, and years ago I saw all the monks walking around with cell phones. Then I heard they banned them, but this last time I was there, they were back again in full force. And so I'm not sure what the monastery policies are, but it's such a huge distraction. You know, in old Tibet, of course, there was nothing else to do, so you studied and memorized and debated, and your whole life was there at the monastery, and you talked to real live human beings. And now, you know, if they join chat rooms, or they surf the internet, or who in the world are they calling? You know, I mean, if you work for the monastery, yes, you need a cell phone, and you know, because you're working for the monastery. But other than that, I'm not so sure. So this is one reason why we have regulations regarding cell phone and internet use here at the Abbey, because it can become really a problem, totally takes you away from your Dharma practice. And so that is a big problem there. Sangha Rinpoche's attendant, Tenzin Wangchuk, who's an old friend of mine, he spent a long time talking to me about this, you know, and it's really difficult for them. Yeah, because of course, you know, young people want, you know, kind of, well, you know how it is. It's like, oh, maybe there's an email for me, you know, and it's like this excitement, maybe there's a message, or, you know, there's a text, or there's something with, you know, some kind of news that's going to bring me everlasting happiness. You know? But if we look at all our emails and all our texts, it's like they're all kind of boring, aren't they? And they're just more stuff to do. But we're so addicted to them. It's like, oh, this one maybe, you know. So anyway, that's off the topic, but that is a problem. So we stayed at Sarah 3 nights, 4 days. And our principal reason for going there was to see Khensur Jampa Tekchok, who, as you know, has been my teacher since the early 80s. And I've had the privilege of editing a couple of his books. And so we went to see him, and like I explained yesterday or the day before, I was saying goodbye to Geshe Sonam Rinchen, and then at Sarah I had to say goodbye to Khensur Jampa Tekchok too. He had an operation a month or so ago. It's been a very, very difficult recovery. He, as you know, used to be enormous, and now he's, I'd say, maybe a third of that weight. He's just very thin, very fragile. He takes walks at night, but during the day he's mostly in his room, and he told me that it's harder for him to concentrate and to remember things now. And so he's not reading text so much, which for Geshe is like, you know, utter suffering, not to be able, because of the functioning of your eyes or your mind, to be able to read your text. Of course, his mind is still happy, and he didn't make a big deal about anything. And he invited us for lunch one day, and we went, which was very nice. And, you know, I know that I'm saying goodbye to him, and I'm not going to cry. And, you know, just I expressed all my appreciation to him. But he was just very matter of fact, and it's like, he gave me a kata and he said, put it on the statue at the stupa at the Abbey. So I have yet to do that. It's sitting in my room. And he was very matter of fact, no sentimentality at all. But it was it was extremely sad to see him in that kind of state when you know, I've known him for so many years and he's just been robust and, you know, completely alive. And we also, when we were there, we met a group of Singaporeans who were there receiving a series of initiations and teachings. And it was very interesting because we had breakfast with them. And so they invited us for breakfast. And so I asked them, what have you learned? You know, because they're taking this whole series of initiations. I said, what have you learned? And then they said something about the 8 worldly concerns, or one person said that, and I said, okay, well, what did you learn about the 8 worldly concerns? And a few people just kind of sat there. They didn't quite know what to say. A few people knew the book answers, yeah, but I was trying to get from them some kind of personal experience, like, you know, how do the 8 worldly concerns manifest in your life? You know, what are you doing about them? Do you think they're a problem? Because I really wanted them to think about this if they're taking all these initiations and doing teachings, because that's what marks the difference between a worldly motivation and a Dharma motivation. So we had an interesting discussion about that. We also went out in the evening to watch the monks debate, and they were doing some special exams for the Geshe Larumpa preparation, so that the Larumpa Geshe are the top of the top. So they're doing these big debates, and they were really into it, I tell you. I think I may have mentioned it to you a few days before, but there was one monk there, he was screaming at the top of his lungs. And when they debate, they talk really, really fast, you know. And he's screaming at the top of his lungs and jumping and doing his saw and pushing the other monks away so that he can get in there and debate, pushing that one away, and then that one comes and pushes him away. I mean, it was really quite a scene. But they were clearly enjoying it. And the abbot was there, so, you know, I mean, this is just how they do it. And if you think about it, for a group of young men, you know, in their late teens and all through their 20s, I mean, this is an excellent thing because they can't go play football and whatever, so they on the debate court, and they're yelling and screaming and jumping and getting all that energy out in a Dharma way. It's actually quite skillful. And they do the debating at night, yeah, because it's clearly going to keep you awake. Okay? Yeah? You know, meditation like we do, you know. But debate, like, whoa, they're going. So we went to watch them, and it was quite amusing. I could tell one of them, the debate centered something about true cessations, which I know is a very juicy, controversial topic. So, but I couldn't tell anything what they were debating about. Okay, so we had quite a nice day at Sarah, and you know, I really pray for these 3 seats in exile, and for the monks there, that they're able to practice well, because they're the ones who have the opportunity to actually hold the lineage. You know, we're practicing and doing everything we can here, but we, you know, the whole canon is not translated into English. We don't have access to all of the teachings. So we're not going to be the lineage holders, you know. It's going to be a few of the monks from these monasteries that become the great lineage holders for the future generations. So I really make prayers for them that they can study and practice very well, because the existence of the Dharma depends on it. And now they aren't strapped for money. You know, now they really need to put their energy into study and practice, which is what His Holiness encouraged so much during the teachings. But it's also more difficult. I mean, not only, I was saying, the computers and cell phones and so on as a distraction, but also the glitter of the West. And for many of the monks who were put in the monasteries when they were young children, when they reach adolescence or post-adolescence, you know, the glitter of, you know, when they see Westerners come there, it seems like the Westerners are just overflowing with money, you know, which they aren't, but because people are generous towards the monks, and because a few quite wealthy Westerners come there and benefact them, they get this idea that the West is just extremely rich, and so they want to come to the West. And then also a lot of them have families who pressure the monks to go to the West. And as soon as they come to the West, so often they disrobe, you know, which is really a pity. And I feel like getting them in a room and scolding them because they don't realize what they're giving up and how they're wasting their life and the good opportunity they have. You know, and I can tell them all about life in the West, but they, you know, they want to go work washing dishes in New York. You know, so you really see the variety of people's karma. You know, they have so much good karma to go to the monastery when they're young. But then when the mind doesn't really understand what samsara is, then the worldly karma of, you know, gee, I can be rich washing dishes at a restaurant in New York. You know, it appears so great, and send money back to my family. You know? Yeah?
Last time you told us in the community about that they are not receiving typical Dhamma teachings, more concentrated on memorizing the philosophical parts. So that's one of the reasons why they maybe don't understand samsara closer.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, because the way they're studying, the educational program hasn't really changed in the last several hundred years. Okay, and so they say you know, how we're usually taught Lam Rim first, and Lam Rim really grabs you and it makes you want to practice, doesn't it? Because you see the preciousness of your life and you think about your own mortality and the meaning of your life and the purpose of your life, so it really makes you want to practice. In the traditional way, they say that Lam Rim is for people who have already studied all the great treatises and who now want to get the highlights of the great treatises and know how to really go off and do retreat on the meaning of them. You know, because when they're studying, they don't do a lot of seated meditation. They say debate is a type of meditation, in that, you know, you're thinking about the teachings and so on. But there you're more analyzing the teachings. It's not so much reflecting how the teachings really pertain to your life as Lam Rim makes you reflect. Yeah, so they don't, you know, on special occasions, like these 2 weeks when His Holiness was teaching, then they get some Lam Rim, but not so much as a part of their daily practice and so on. And so, you know, in old Tibet that didn't matter so much, because what else were you going to do? You know, if you were a monk, that was your avenue for education. The alternative was to go, you know, work the land and tend the field, or tend the animals. But now in India, they have the whole world in front of them, you know, and the opportunity to get so much. And so if you don't have a strong Lam Rim basis, you know, the temptation of the material world can so easily carry you away. Yeah, and so of course I have my ideas about how I would change everything, but nobody wants to hear them, so that's okay. But it is a problem. It is a problem. Okay, to be continued tomorrow.